They called him quiet because they had no idea his silence was the only thing keeping their badges alive. At 6:12 on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, Captain Marcus Ellison stood at the back of Briefing Room 3 inside the Westbridge Police Department. His dark blue uniform pressed sharp, his boots clean despite the wet pavement outside, his old leather case resting beside one polished shoe. The room smelled like burnt coffee, damp wool, and the kind of arrogance that had been sitting too long behind locked doors. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A wall clock ticked with a lazy, stubborn rhythm. Radios crackled softly from shoulders and desks, filling the silence with broken codes and routine dispatch calls. 12 officers sat around the long table, most of them white, most of them leaning back like the room belonged to them, like the city belonged to them, like every person outside those walls existed only as paperwork waiting to happen. Sergeant Cole Whitman sat at the head of the table, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, one hand wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, his badge catching the light every time he moved. He had the relaxed smile of a man who had avoided consequences for so long that he had mistaken survival for innocence. When Marcus entered, Cole did not stand. None of them did. A few eyes lifted, measured him, dismissed him, then returned to their phones. Marcus said nothing. He simply walked to the side of the room and waited. That was when Cole chuckled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You always this quiet, Captain?" he asked, dragging the title out like it tasted funny in his mouth. A few officers smirked. Officer Blake Harris covered a laugh with his fist. Officer Daniel Price looked down at his notes, smiling anyway. Cole leaned back farther, enjoying the attention. Or did they only send you here to stand in the corner and make the department photo look better? The room laughed. Not everyone loudly. Some laughed under their breath. Some looked away and pretended they had not heard. But no one corrected him. No one told him to stop. No one remembered that silence can also be a witness. Marcus looked at Cole for one calm second, then glanced at the small black dome camera in the upper corner of the room. Its red light blinked once. Then again. Recording. Cole noticed the glance and smiled wider, mistaking it for nervousness. "Come on, Ellison," he said. "Around here, men speak up when they've earned the room." Marcus set his leather case on the table with a soft, heavy sound. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just final. "Good," he said, his voice low and even. "Then I'll wait until you're finished." Something in the room shifted, but only slightly, like a door closing somewhere far away. Cole's smile twitched. The younger officers looked at one another, unsure if they had missed the joke. Outside, rain tapped against the narrow windows. Inside, Marcus stood still, hands relaxed, shoulders squared, eyes steady. He had heard worse before. On traffic stops, in locker rooms, in court hallways, behind closed doors where people thought the absence of outrage meant the absence of memory. But Marcus Ellison had built his career on listening to what powerful men said when they believed no one important was listening. He had spent 15 years in internal affairs learning the language of corruption, the missing camera footage, the rewritten report, the witness who suddenly changed her story, the officer who laughed at complaints because complaints had never touched his paycheck. And this room, this cold little room with old chairs and stale coffee, had been speaking for months. Every broken camera, every sealed file, every complaint buried under the word inconclusive, every young man from the east side marked as resisting when the video showed him standing still. They thought Marcus had arrived that morning for training. They thought he was a public relations answer to a public relations problem. They thought his quiet meant uncertainty, weakness, maybe even fear. But Marcus had not come to be welcomed. He had not come to be liked. He had come because 47 families had been ignored, because 11 formal complaints carried the same officer names, because one mother named Denise Grant had written letter after letter asking why her son lost his scholarship over a charge that fell apart in court, but stayed alive in a police database. Cole lifted his cup again, still performing for the room. "You got anything to say, Captain?" Marcus looked at the clock. 6:17. 3 minutes until Deputy Chief Angela Brooks would walk through that door with 2 internal affairs investigators and a representative from the county prosecutor's office. 3 minutes until the laughter would end. Marcus opened the clasp on his leather case. "Not yet," he said. "I'm still listening." Marcus did not open the case all the way. Not yet. He only released the first clasp and let the second one stay locked, because timing mattered, and in rooms like this, Timing could make the difference between a man denying the truth and a man exposing himself trying to outrun it. Cole Whitman watched the movement with a crooked smile, still pretending he controlled the air. Around him, the other officers settled back into their chairs, but the laughter had softened into something thinner. Less confident, more careful. Officer Blake Harris tapped his pen against a blank notepad. Officer Daniel Price rubbed his thumb along the edge of his coffee cup. Officer Ryan Keller kept glancing from Marcus to the door, as if his instincts understood what his pride refused to admit. The Westbridge Police Department had always looked ordinary from the outside. A three-story brick building on Maple Avenue with a faded flag out front and a row of patrol cars lined up beside the curb. To the mayor, it was a symbol of order. To television reporters, it was a reliable backdrop after late-night arrests. To certain neighborhoods on the east side, it was something else entirely. It was the place where complaints disappeared. It was where mothers came with cell phone videos and left with case numbers that never called back. It was where young men learned to keep their hands visible, their voices low, and their fear hidden, because fear was too often written down as guilt by the time the report reached a desk. The unit sitting in Briefing Room 3 had built its reputation on results. High arrest numbers, fast reports, clean paperwork. They were praised at city council meetings and photographed at charity events, always. Smiling beside donated bicycles and holiday food drives. Always standing close enough to the cameras for the public to see the badge, but far enough from accountability for the public to see the cracks. But Marcus had seen the cracks. He had seen the patrol logs that changed after midnight. He had seen body cameras listed as malfunctioning during the exact 4 minutes when complaints said something important happened. He had seen evidence bags signed out by one officer and entered by another, with no explanation in between. He had seen the same phrase appear in too many reports, written by different hands, but sounding like the same voice. Subject became aggressive. It was a convenient sentence. Short, clean, powerful. It could turn a scared teenager into a threat. It could turn a confused father into a suspect. It could turn a neighborhood into a problem instead of a community. And for years, nobody inside this room had paid the price for using it. Cole took a slow sip of coffee and looked at Marcus over the rim of the cup. "You know, Captain, we were told this was supposed to be a procedural review," he said. "So far, all I see is a man with a briefcase and a lot of attitude for somebody who has not said much." A few officers smiled again, but this time the sound did not spread. Marcus did not answer right away. He looked at the bulletin board behind Cole, where commendation photos were pinned beside wanted notices and outdated department memos. In one photograph, Cole was shaking hands with the police commissioner. In another, Harris and Price stood beside a table of seized property, grinning like boys after a football win. The images were polished, official, harmless. But Marcus knew what the camera had not captured. He knew about the old woman who filed a complaint after her grandson was stopped 3 times in 1 week walking home from his job at a grocery store 2 miles away. He knew about the single father whose work truck had been searched on the side of Route 16 while his 6-year-old daughter cried in the back seat. He knew about Isaiah Grant, 18 years old, honor roll student, track runner, scholarship letter folded in his backpack the night. Cole's unit accused him of carrying stolen property that was never properly logged. The charge had been dropped months later, but the damage had already done what damage does. Quietly, permanently, without apology. Marcus placed one hand on the top of the case. "Procedural review," he repeated. His voice was calm enough to make the words feel heavier. Cole shrugged. "That is what they called it." Marcus looked at him. "Then let us talk about procedure." The room became still. Rain continued tapping the windows, steady and soft, like fingers counting down. Marcus walked to the front of the table, not rushing, not performing, and stopped beside the old projector screen mounted against the wall. "Procedure is what protects the public from emotion," he said. "It is what keeps power from becoming personal. It is what makes a badge a responsibility instead of a weapon." Cole's smile faded by 1 small inch. Marcus continued. "When procedure disappears, people do not just lose cases. They lose jobs. They lose scholarships. They lose trust. And sometimes, they lose the belief that anyone in this building would ever tell the truth for them." No one laughed now. Not even Harris. Marcus looked around the room, letting his eyes rest on each face long enough for every officer to feel seen. Then he turned back to Cole. So yes, Sergeant Whitman, he said quietly. This is a procedural review. He pressed the button on the remote lying beside the projector. The screen flickered to life, pale blue in the dim room. And you are going to want to pay attention. The projector hummed softly as the pale blue screen trembled against the wall, and for the first time that morning, the officers in briefing room 3 stopped looking at Marcus like he was furniture. Cole Whitman leaned back in his chair, but the movement no longer carried confidence. It looked rehearsed, like a man trying to remind the room that he was not worried. Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. The way Harris stopped tapping his pen. The way Price shifted his chair back half an inch. The way Keller swallowed and stared at the blank screen as if something on it had already accused him. Marcus let the silence stretch, not because he enjoyed watching them sweat, but because silence had a way of making guilty people fill the room for you. Cole finally broke first. You planning to show us a slideshow, Captain? He asked, forcing a laugh that found no company. Marcus turned his head slowly. I am planning to show you why this department stopped being trusted. The words did not land loudly. They landed cleanly. Cole's jaw tightened. Careful, he said. This unit has carried this precinct for years. Marcus nodded once. That is what the numbers say. He clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. A simple bar chart. Arrest numbers by unit. Case closure rates. Commendations. Public statements from city officials praising the Midnight Unit for productivity. For a moment, a little air returned to Cole's chest. This was familiar ground. This was the kind of paper armor he had worn for years. Statistics without faces. Results without context. There, Cole said, spreading one hand. You see that? That is police work. Marcus looked at the screen, then back at the room. No, he said. That is activity. He clicked again. A second chart appeared, this one showing complaint rates by unit over 5 years. The Midnight Unit stood above every other unit by a margin no one could explain away with pride. The room changed temperature without the thermostat moving. Marcus kept his voice steady. 47 formal complaints. 32 involving stops with no citation issued. 21 involving missing or incomplete camera footage. 11 involving citizens who later provided independent video that contradicted the written report. Price stared at the screen with his mouth slightly open. Harris looked down. Keller rubbed both hands over his knees. Cole stayed still, but a vein near his temple began to pulse. Complaints are easy to file, Cole said. People get angry when they get caught. Marcus nodded again, as if he had expected the sentence word for word. That is true. A complaint is not proof. That is why good departments investigate them. That is why good officers welcome the process. Because the process protects the honest as much as it exposes the dishonest. He clicked again. A photograph appeared, not graphic, not dramatic, just a school portrait of Isaiah Grant in a blue graduation gown, smiling with the careful hope of someone standing at the edge of a future he believed he had earned. The room fell into a different kind of quiet. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. Cole's eyes moved away from the screen too quickly. Marcus saw it. Isaiah Grant, Marcus said. 18 years old. Senior at Westbridge Central High School. Worked 26 hours a week at Marlowe's Grocery. Ran the 400-meter dash. Accepted to Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship with a track supplement pending final review. He paused. Stopped by this unit on March 12th at 9:43 at night, less than half a mile from his home. Cole cleared his throat. If this is about the Grant stop, that case was reviewed. Marcus looked at him. It was closed. Cole's eyes narrowed. Marcus continued. Those are not the same thing. The projector fanword. Rain whispered against the glass. In that small space between truth and denial, Marcus remembered the first time he had seen Isaiah's file. Not the official version, but the one his mother carried in a folder with bent corners and handwritten notes in the margins. Denise Grant had sat across from him in a community center basement after a listening session most officers skipped. She did not yell. She did not threaten. She simply opened the folder and said, I need someone to read it like my son is a person. That sentence had followed Marcus for weeks. It followed him into the patrol logs, into the camera archives, into the evidence room records, into every late night when the department lights were low and the truth sat waiting inside badly named files. Marcus clicked again. The screen changed to a timeline. Dispatch call. Traffic stop. Search notation. Evidence entry. Report submission. Camera upload. Each timestamp was lined up with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. Marcus stepped aside so every man could see it clearly. The report says the stop began at 9:43, he said. Body camera metadata says recording started at 9:51. Harris exhaled too. Sharply. Marcus heard it. The report says stolen property was recovered at the scene. Evidence logs show the item was entered 2 hours later by an officer who was not listed as present. Price stopped moving entirely. Marcus clicked once more. A final line appeared in bold black letters. The report was edited the next morning at 6:18. Marcus turned from the screen and looked directly at Cole. "By you." Cole stared at the final line on the screen as if the letters had been placed there by mistake, as if enough anger might rearrange them into something harmless. For 2 seconds, nobody moved. The clock ticked above the door. Rain tapped the glass. The projector painted Cole's name across the wall in cold black text, and every officer in the room understood that the morning had turned a corner they could not walk back from. Cole set his coffee down slowly. "That is administrative," he said. His voice was lower now, stripped of the easy humor he had worn like a shield. "Reports get updated all the time. You know that." Marcus did not blink. "Reports get corrected," he said. "They do not get rewritten to match evidence that was entered later." Harris shifted in his chair. Price looked toward Cole, waiting for direction, but Cole had no direction to give. Not yet. He was still measuring the room, still searching for the old exits. Confidence, intimidation, ridicule, rank. He chose ridicule first, because men like Cole always returned to what had worked before. He leaned back and forced a thin smile. "You know what this is?" he said, turning slightly so the others could hear him. "This is what happens when City Hall panics. They send in a quiet man with a polished file and expect us to apologize for doing the job nobody else wants to do." Marcus watched him without expression. Cole pointed at the screen. "You think charts know what a street feels like at 2 in the morning? You think a spreadsheet knows what it is like when people lie to your face?" Marcus folded his hands in front of him. "I think a spreadsheet knows when 8 cameras failed during 8 separate complaints involving the same 4 officers." The words cut the room clean. Keller looked down. At the table, Harris stopped breathing for a beat. Cole's eyes hardened, but Marcus could see the calculation behind them. The sergeant was no longer trying to win the argument. He was trying to survive the record. "This is exactly your problem," Cole said, standing now. His chair scraped backward, loud against the floor. "You come in here with your quiet voice and your fancy title, acting like the rest of us are dirty because we do not talk like you, because we do not fit whatever clean little image the department wants to sell this month." Marcus let him stand. Let him perform. Let the red light in the corner blink. Cole stepped away from the table, not close enough to threaten, just close enough to test the air. "You were not here," he continued. "You do not know this district. You do not know these streets. You do not know what we deal with." Marcus waited. Cole's face tightened with something uglier than frustration. "And maybe that is why you are so quiet, Ellison. Maybe deep down, you know you were sent here for optics, not because you earned the right to judge anybody in this room." The words hung there, careful enough to deny, sharp enough to wound. The younger officers froze, not because they disagreed, but because Cole had finally said the private thing too loudly. Marcus felt it land. Not as surprise, not as pain fresh enough to bleed, more like an old bruise pressed by a familiar hand. He had heard polished versions of that sentence his whole career. In academies, in promotion panels, in hallways where praise came with suspicion attached. Every black officer who rose too high, too calmly, too cleanly, learned the same lesson. Some people would rather question your place than question their own failure. But Marcus did not come to that room to defend his resume. He came to defend the people whose names had been buried under false language and official silence. He looked at Cole, then at every officer seated behind him. "Let me teach you something about earned authority," Marcus said. His voice was still quiet, but now the quiet had weight. "It is not earned by frightening people who cannot fight back. It is not earned by laughing at complaints. It is not earned by making a report look clean after the truth got messy." Cole's jaw flexed. Marcus stepped toward the screen and clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared, this one listing audio file names, body camera identifiers, dispatch records, and evidence locker access logs. The room seemed to shrink around the table. "It is earned," Marcus continued. by being willing to tell the truth even when the truth points back at your own badge. Price whispered, almost without meaning to. Where did you get all of that? Marcus turned to him. From the places you forgot had memory. The door remained closed. The clock read 6:19. 1 minute left. Marcus set the remote down and opened the second clasp on the leather case. The sound was small, but it traveled through the room like a gavel. Marcus lifted a folder from the leather case and placed it on the table, but he did not open it immediately. He let the room look at it. A plain manila folder. No dramatic seal. No flashing warning. Just paper, held together by a metal clip, carrying more weight than any raised voice in that room. Cole stared at it with the stiff expression of a man trying to decide whether to laugh again or call a lawyer. The clock above the door clicked to 6:20. At that exact moment, Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway, measured, steady, approaching but not yet entering. He did not look toward the door. He wanted Cole to keep talking. He wanted the room to hear the difference between confidence and truth. "You have been busy," Cole said, his voice dry. "Digging through old complaints, twisting numbers, making honest officers look like criminals. That must feel good, right? Gives you a reason to stand up there like you are better than us." Marcus looked at him. "This is not about being better than you." Cole scoffed. "No? Then what is it about?" Marcus opened the folder. Inside were copies of statements, audit summaries, access logs, and photographs of documents that had been quietly recovered from places where they should not have been hidden. It is about whether the people of this city can call for help without wondering if help will come with a lie attached to it. The room went still again, but this time it was not just fear. It was discomfort, the kind that entered when someone said the simple thing everyone had been trained to avoid. Marcus pulled out the first page. April 2nd. Mrs. Lorraine Baptiste filed a complaint after her grandson was stopped walking home from work. No citation. No arrest. No incident report until she requested one. When the report appeared, it claimed he matched a burglary description. Dispatch records show there had been no burglary call in that area for over 6 hours. Harris closed his eyes briefly. Marcus placed the page down and pulled another. May 9th. Terrence Lowe, a delivery driver, was detained for 42 minutes on Route 16. His employer's dashboard camera showed he had not committed the traffic violation written in the report. The body camera file from that stop was labeled corrupted. Price whispered, "That was equipment failure." Marcus did not raise his voice. "Then you had remarkable equipment failure. Always near the same officers. Always near the same neighborhoods. Always after the same kind of complaint." No one answered. Outside the room, the footsteps stopped. A shadow appeared beneath the door. Cole noticed it now, and for the first time, his eyes flickered toward the hallway. Marcus continued before he could speak. June 21st. Isaiah Grant. The evidence log shows a watch entered at 12:13 in the morning. The report says it was recovered at the scene at 9:58 in the evening. The convenience store receipt later found in Isaiah's backpack showed he was buying sports tape 3 miles away at the time the report claimed he was standing beside the item. Keller's face lost color. "I did not know about the receipt," he said quietly. Cole snapped his head toward him. "Do not say anything." Marcus looked at Keller. "That is how this works, is it not? Someone starts to tell the truth, and the room teaches him to be quiet." The sentence landed harder than accusation because it sounded like recognition. Keller looked down at his hands. They were shaking just enough to betray him. Cole stepped back toward his chair. "This meeting is over," he said. "Until Union Counsel is present, nobody says another word." Marcus nodded. "You are entitled to representation for any interview related to misconduct. This is not an interview." Cole froze. Marcus turned one more page and revealed the signed administrative order beneath it. "This is a notice of immediate operational suspension pending investigation." The door opened. Deputy Chief Angela Brooks stepped into the room wearing a dark coat over her uniform, her face calm, her eyes sharper than the morning light behind her. 2 internal affairs investigators followed, along with Assistant County Prosecutor Elena Marsh carrying a sealed evidence pouch. The laughter from earlier seemed impossible now, like something that had happened in another building to different men. Angela looked at Cole, then at the officers around the table. "Remain seated," she said. "Captain Ellison has the floor." Cole's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Marcus lifted the final document from the folder, the one carrying the department letterhead and the signature that mattered. Then he looked at the unit that had mistaken his silence for weakness. "Now," he said, "we can begin." Deputy Chief Angela Brooks did not need to raise her voice to take control of the room. She only had to stand there, still and certain, while the officers who had laughed minutes earlier suddenly remembered how rank worked when it was not protecting them. Her eyes moved across the table, not with anger, but with the colder weight of disappointment. Behind her, the two internal affairs investigators closed the door, and Assistant County Prosecutor Elena Marsh placed the sealed evidence pouch on the side table as carefully as if it contained glass. Marcus watched Cole's face change in small pieces. First disbelief, then calculation, then the first trace of fear, quickly buried under a mask of offense. Cole stood straighter. "Deputy Chief, with respect, this is completely unnecessary. If there are concerns, we can handle them through the chain of command." Angela looked at him. "We are handling them through the chain of command." The words were simple, but they removed something from Cole that he had counted on for years. The assumption that the chain would always bend around him. Marcus unfolded the administrative order and placed it flat on the table. "Effective immediately," he said. "All members of the Midnight Unit listed in this order are relieved of active field duty, pending the outcome of an integrity investigation. Department devices will be surrendered. Access to case management systems will be suspended. Evidence lockers connected to your recent arrests have been sealed." Harris stared at him. "You already sealed them?" Marcus looked back at him. "At 5:40 this morning." Price let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. Cole turned toward Angela. "You let him do this before even speaking to us." Angela's expression did not change. "Captain Ellison was appointed by my office 3 weeks ago. His authority was active the moment the order was signed." The room absorbed that slowly. 3 weeks. That meant Marcus had not arrived this morning as an outsider stepping into a cold room. He had been there long before they saw him. Inside files, inside logs, inside conversations people forgot could be traced. He had been walking through the truth while they were still laughing at the shadow. Marcus clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a map of Westbridge with marked traffic stops. Red dots clustered heavily across the east side, packed so tightly that they looked less like law enforcement data and more like a warning rash spreading over the city. "This is not one report," Marcus said. "This is a pattern. Patterns are important because they tell us when misconduct stops being a mistake and starts becoming culture." Keller looked at the map with wet eyes, though he held himself together. "I never changed evidence," he said softly. Cole snapped, "Be quiet." Angela turned her head toward Cole. "Sergeant Whitman, you will not instruct anyone in this room to remain silent." The sentence froze him. Marcus looked at Keller, and his voice softened without losing authority. "No one is asking you to confess in a briefing room. You will have representation. You will have process. But understand this clearly. Process is not a shield for lies. It is a path back to facts." Keller nodded once, almost invisibly. Marcus clicked again. The next slide showed a list of cases selected for independent review. Some were minor charges. Some had already been dismissed. Some were still affecting people's lives through probation terms, lost jobs, housing denials, suspended licenses, and background checks that did not care whether a person had ever been convicted. Marcus pointed to the list. "Every case touched by this unit in the last 18 months will be screened. Any case with missing footage, inconsistent reporting, or unsupported evidence will be forwarded for review. Every citizen who filed a complaint will receive a response, not a case number buried in a drawer." Elena Marsh stepped forward for the first time. "The county prosecutor's office has opened a parallel review. If any case was built on false statements or altered records, we will take appropriate legal action and notify defense counsel." Those words did what the charts had not. They made the consequences real. Not internal, not quiet, not something handled over coffee behind a closed door. Cole's hand curled around the back of his chair. "You are going to destroy careers over paperwork." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "No, Sergeant. Paperwork did not destroy these careers. Choices did. Paperwork only remembered them." The room fell silent again. But this time, the silence did not belong to Marcus alone. It belonged to every report that had been edited after midnight, every complaint that had been laughed off, every citizen who had been told nobody would believe them. Marcus closed the folder and finally allowed the full weight of his voice to enter the room. "A badge is not a trophy. It is not a family heirloom. It is not permission to make the public smaller so you can feel larger. It is a public promise. And when that promise is broken, the first duty of this department is not to protect the badge. It is to protect the people from the person wearing it. Angela gave a small nod to the investigators. One stepped beside the table and began collecting department phones. The other handed out written notices. No one laughed. No one joked. No one called Marcus too. Quiet. Cole looked at the paper in front of him, then at Marcus, and for one brief second, the man who had owned the room looked like he had never belonged there at all. The notices moved around the table like small white verdicts. One by one, each officer received a page that carried more authority than any insult they had thrown that morning. Harris read his twice, his lips parting without sound. Price kept one hand flat on the paper, as if holding it down could keep the words from becoming real. Keller stared at his notice for only a moment before closing his eyes, not in defiance, but in the exhausted way of a man who had known this day was possible and had feared it would never come. Cole did not sit. He stood behind his chair with both hands gripping the backrest, his knuckles pale, his badge still shining on his chest, but suddenly looking less like honor and more like evidence. Marcus did not enjoy that sight. That was what Cole would never understand. This was not pleasure. This was not revenge. Marcus had seen too many good officers carry the weight of bad ones, too many honest rookies taught to laugh at the wrong things, too many communities forced to choose between needing help and fearing the help that arrived. Accountability was not cruelty. It was maintenance. It was how a public promise got repaired before it collapsed on the people beneath it. Deputy Chief Brooks stepped closer to the table. You will surrender department phones, access cards, and any assigned equipment listed on the notice. You will not contact complainants, witnesses, or each other about open matters connected to this investigation. You will receive instructions regarding representation and formal interviews. Cole gave a bitter laugh, but it broke halfway through. You already decided we are guilty. Marcus turned to him. No. The process will decide findings. Today decides access. Cole pointed toward the screen. You put our names up there like criminals. Angela answered before Marcus could. Your names were already in the files, Sergeant. Captain Ellison put the files in order. That sentence struck harder than any accusation. Cole looked around the room, searching for loyalty. Harris avoided his eyes. Price stared at the table. Keller finally looked up, and the fear in his face had changed into something else. Not courage yet. Maybe relief. Maybe shame. Maybe the first honest breath after years of holding one in. I want to make a statement, Keller said quietly. Cole turned on him. Ryan, do not be stupid. Angela's voice cut in, calm but absolute. Sergeant Whitman. The room froze. Cole stopped. Angela looked at Keller. Officer Keller, you will have the opportunity to speak with counsel present. Do not make a formal statement here, but you are safe to say you are willing to cooperate. Keller nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I am willing to cooperate. There it was. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic confession. Just one sentence, small and human, cracking the wall that had protected the unit for years. Marcus saw Harris flinch. He saw Price's face tighten. He saw Cole realize that silence was no longer working for him because the wrong man had taught the room what silence could hold. Assistant County Prosecutor Elena Marsh opened the sealed evidence pouch and removed a printed inventory, not the evidence itself, just the list. She read with professional precision. Recovered audit materials include duplicated body camera metadata, corrected dispatch records, evidence locker access reports, civilian video submissions, and internal message exports preserved under legal hold. Price looked up sharply at the phrase internal message exports. Harris whispered, messages? Marcus looked at them both. Department devices are not private when used for department business. Cole's face darkened with humiliation, but he said nothing. He knew. They all knew. The jokes, the shortcuts, the casual words typed late at night because men with power often mistake comfort for secrecy. Marcus stepped back from the table and let the investigators collect the phones. One device after another was placed into labeled evidence bags. Plastic sealed. Names written. Chain of custody established. Procedure, the very thing Cole had mocked, now moved through the room with quiet precision. And that was the lesson Marcus wanted every person in that building to understand. Real justice did not need to shout to be strong. It needed records. It needed witnesses. It needed people willing to read what others had buried. It needed courage, but not the loud kind that performed for applause. The hard kind. The kind that sits through mockery without becoming cruel. The kind that remembers the human being behind every complaint number. When the last phone was collected, Marcus faced the unit again. "Some of you still think this is about punishment," he said. "It is not. Punishment is what comes after a system fails to correct itself. This is correction. This is the department telling the public that trust matters more than comfort, more than reputation, more than protecting people just because they wear the same uniform." Cole lowered his eyes for the first time. Outside the windows, the rain began to slow. The city beyond the glass was waking up, buses groaning through wet streets, headlights passing in silver streaks, people heading to work with no idea that inside this old brick building, a room that had once protected lies was finally being forced to tell the truth. The first officer escorted out was Harris. He did not argue. He only placed his access card on the table, picked up the notice with careful fingers, and walked toward the door with his shoulders lower than they had been all morning. Price followed next, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if the old linoleum had suddenly become easier to face than the people in the room. Keller remained seated until one of the internal affairs investigators quietly told him where to go. Before he stood, he looked at Marcus. There was no friendship in that look, no easy forgiveness. But there was something honest beginning to form there, something that might one day become accountability if he had the courage to carry it beyond fear. "Captain," Keller said, voice unsteady. Isaiah Grant was not the only one. Cole closed his eyes. The room tightened. Marcus did not move. He had expected more names. He had feared more names. But hearing it spoken still changed the air. Deputy Chief Brooks turned toward Keller, her expression careful. "You will give that information through the proper channel, with counsel present." Keller nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Then he left, and the door closed softly behind him. For the first time since the meeting began, Cole Whitman was alone at the table. The man who had used laughter as a wall now had nothing left to hide behind. His phone was sealed. His access was suspended. His unit was gone. His words from the last hour were preserved, not as rumors, not as complaints, but as part of the record. Marcus gathered the documents slowly. He was not rushing, because rushing would make this look like anger, and anger had never been the point. Cole watched him with red-rimmed eyes and a mouth pressed tight against whatever apology pride would not allow him to say. "You think this fixes anything?" Cole asked. Marcus placed the final folder back into the leather case. "No," the answer seemed to surprise him. Marcus closed the case. "It starts something. Fixing it takes longer." Cole looked toward the covered windows, toward the gray morning leaking through the blinds. "You do not understand what this job does to people." Marcus looked at him then, fully. "I understand what people do when they stop seeing other people as people." Cole had no reply. Deputy Chief Brooks stepped forward and removed Cole's badge from active duty status with a formal written receipt, not with humiliation, not with spectacle, but with the calm precision of a system finally doing what it should have done years earlier. Cole signed where he was told to sign. His hand moved slowly. The pen scratched across the paper, small and ordinary, and somehow that ordinary sound felt heavier than all the laughter that had filled the room before. When the investigators escorted him out, he did not look back at Marcus. Maybe he could not. Maybe he knew that the room behind him no longer belonged to the version of himself he had protected for so long. After the door shut, briefing room 3 felt larger and emptier at the same time. The chairs sat crooked. The coffee had gone cold. The projector still glowed against the wall, showing the case review list like a quiet promise. Angela Brooks exhaled for the first time that morning. "You handled that cleanly," she said. Marcus looked at the empty chairs. Clean is what they denied everyone else. She studied him for a moment. "The press will hear about the suspensions by noon. The mayor will want a statement. The union will push back. Some people in this building will say you went too far." Marcus nodded. He had known that before he walked in. Doing the right thing inside an institution rarely felt like applause. More often, it felt like standing in a hallway while doors closed around you. Angela continued. "The Grant case review starts today. Marsh is assigning 2 prosecutors to it. We are also opening a public complaint review line with outside oversight." Marcus looked up at that, not because it was dramatic, but because it mattered. Consequences were necessary, but repair required access. People needed a door that opened when they knocked. They needed a voice that did not turn their pain into a file number and then bury it. He walked to the window and lifted one slat of the blinds. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. Across Maple Avenue, a city bus pulled to the curb. A woman in scrubs stepped off, holding a lunch bag under her coat. A teenage boy waited under the awning of a closed barber shop, backpack over one shoulder, watching patrol cars with the careful stillness too many children learn too early. Marcus let the blind fall back into place. Then we start with the people who were ignored, he said. Angela nodded. Mrs. Grant is downstairs. Marcus turned slowly. For the first time that morning, something moved across his face that was not strategy, not restraint, not professional calm. It was memory. Denise Grant in a basement meeting room. Denise Grant with 11 unanswered letters. Denise Grant asking him to read her son's file like her son was a person. Marcus picked up the leather case. Then she should not have to wait another minute. Marcus found Denise Grant sitting on a wooden bench in the first-floor lobby, both hands wrapped around a folder that had been opened and closed so many times the edges had softened. She wore a gray coat buttoned to the neck, sensible black shoes, and the tired dignity of a woman who had spent too many mornings asking polite questions to people who had already decided not to answer. When she saw Marcus step out of the elevator, she stood too quickly, then caught herself, as if even hope had to be handled carefully inside a police station. Captain Ellison, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes searched his face for the truth before he could speak it. Marcus walked toward her with Deputy Chief Brooks a few steps behind him and Assistant County Prosecutor Marsh waiting near the front desk. The lobby was busy in the ordinary way government buildings are busy. Phones ringing, shoes moving across tile, a clerk stamping papers, a man filling out a form with a borrowed pen. Yet around Denise, the world seemed to slow. Marcus had spent the morning speaking to officers, reading orders, presenting evidence, taking control of a room built to resist him. But this moment mattered more than all of it. Because the point of accountability was not the fall of Cole Whitman. It was the restoration of people like Denise Grant, people who had been told to wait while their lives were damaged in real time. Marcus stopped in front of her and held the leather case at his side. Mrs. Grant, he said, your son's case has been reopened for independent review. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She looked down at the folder in her hands, then back at him. Reopened, she repeated, as if testing whether the word could hold weight. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. The county prosecutor's office will review the evidence, the report history, the camera records, and the evidence log. You will receive written updates. Not silence. Not another case number. Updates. Denise pressed the folder to her chest. For a moment, her face did not break. It held. It held like mothers learn to hold when they have had to be strong in rooms where strength was the only thing people respected. Then her eyes filled, not with defeat, but with the first painful shape of relief. I wrote 11 letters, she said. Marcus looked at her with the full attention every one of those letters had deserved. I know. She swallowed. I was not asking them to favor my son. I was asking them to see him. Marcus thought of Isaiah's graduation picture on the screen upstairs, the blue gown, the careful smile, the future interrupted by a sentence written too easily in an official report. They should have seen him the first time, Marcus said. Denise's fingers tightened around the folder. Why now? The question was not angry. It was older than anger. It carried every unanswered call, every receptionist who transferred her to a voicemail, every official phrase that sounded respectful while doing nothing. Marcus looked through the lobby windows at the mist outside, at the wet pavement, at the patrol cars parked in a neat row beneath a gray Ohio sky. Then he looked back at her, because someone finally listened long enough to follow the truth. Denise closed her eyes. One tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, almost embarrassed by it. Marcus did not look away. Tears were not weakness. Silence was not weakness. Grief was not weakness. The world had simply grown too comfortable, mistaking dignity for surrender. Deputy Chief Brooks stepped forward and handed Denise a card with a direct number printed on it. You will not have to start over, she said. My office will contact you this afternoon. Denise took the card with both hands. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus knew thank you was too small for what had been taken, and justice was too large a word for what had only begun. But beginnings mattered. A reopened case mattered. A mother being heard mattered. A department choosing truth over comfort mattered. Upstairs, a corrupt unit had lost its protection. Downstairs, a woman who had been ignored finally had a door open. Marcus turned toward the hallway where the morning light spilled across the tile. He did not feel victorious. He felt responsible. That was the difference Cole had never understood. Power was not proven by how many people you could silence. It was proven by whose voice you were willing to protect when silence would have been easier. As Marcus walked back toward the elevator, the station seemed different, not clean, not healed, not suddenly safe, but awake. And sometimes that was how justice entered a broken place. Not as thunder, not as revenge, but as a quiet man carrying the truth carefully enough that no one could bury it again. They had laughed because he did not raise his voice. They had mistaken restraint for fear and patience for permission. But silence was never his weakness. It was the sound of justice taking notes.